open your consciousness and open your hearts to receive from the great energy of the people throughout the room. And for the rest of us who have been together, this is our last time of having a few minutes to consciously support our wholeness, our slowing down, and our integration. And another way of integrating all that we have been receiving, great conversations, a lot of information, a lot of heart connections, another way of integrating all that and really crystallizing into wisdom and integrating into the body is to give gratitude. And so we have two mics. We have a mic here this time, and we have a mic over here. And I just want to invite anyone in the community who would like to step forward. And again, Crystal, we want to get at the treasure. So a minute or less to support our integration. But if anyone wants to step forward and give any kind of gratitude for your experience and time here, come on forward. And just say your name, too, if you would.
My name is Gwendolyn Hallsmith. I'm down from Montpelier. And I'd just like to offer gratitude for all of the hands that went to make this a success. The food was delicious. The sessions were stimulating and meaningful. And even the way people interacted really reflected the slow living ethic. So thank you.
You're so welcome.
Hi, I'm George, and I want to give gratitude to the economic system that did help us get here, and to honor it by maturing it and continue forward with slow living. So I appreciate the prosperity that this country has given to us, but I think it's on our shoulders, and that's why we're here, to take it forward in a new way.
Hi, I'm Hans Smith. I'm a local farmer in Brattleboro, and these past 3 days have been life-changing in my life, and it's made me more mature as a man and a farmer and the economic growth of the United States of America. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Berry, and I think that we all really ought to give this incredible thanks to Orly for her vision and her untiring work in pulling this all off. So let's have a big hand for Orly. She's glaring at me back there.
My name is Linda Weil. Some of you know I'm from out of state, came from Florida. I'd like to thank the town of Brattleboro, individuals and community together. I've met so many wonderful people over the last few days that, you know, I'm a stranger in their town. They've opened their hearts, their time, taking me back and forth, you know, inviting me to the man who takes care of this theater allowed me to walk around and take photographs when nobody else was here. The man who made the little small garden near the food co-op, you know, where it says welcome, and there's a little bench there, and he took care of that garden. I think his name is Noble. I mean, just Bill Noble. So many people who have made this just an extraordinary journey for me, yourself, and others. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karen Ribeiro, and my business is Inner Fortune. And I just want to give gratitude to you, Lori, for being the steward of slowness and for your beautiful words and the 2 minutes that really began each day. Thank you.
My name is Stephen K. Brooks. I'd like to thank Brattleboro Time Trade and the people who are working to make it successful for providing a venue where we can put some of these ideas about into effect about making face-to-face relationships the basis of our economic activity instead of commodities, instead of making one another into commodities.
And Terry, before you go, if you're burning, come on up, and those will be the final gratitudes for the whole. Thank you.
All the truth that is possible to know is always fully present. What matures is our understanding of it. I broke from the business tracks and went to the spirit track. I cried and I matured.
My name's Jonathan, and I talked with a lot of people. I went to a bunch of different tracks, and what's interesting is that a lot of the tracks and the idea of slow matches with other traditions that focus on, first of all, awareness. You could call it FaceTime. Slow money, all this slow food, it's all similar. It's about that. Awareness, compassion, and then focus. That's also what mindfulness is about, but that's what everybody is engaged in, those three things from so many different avenues to create more connectedness. So I would just say thanks for the awareness that I've gotten that there are people doing this work from different avenues, and also for the actual work that we're all doing. So thanks to all of us.
My name is Samadhi Demi. I'm grateful for the courage of all the people represented here at this conference who not only have the vision of a sustainable future, but are willing to do the work to make it real.
Well, these four human beings will lead us off. Stay up, and let's have everyone just stand up, because another way to integrate is to support the mindfulness of the body. And so let's just take this last few seconds here just to give good stretches, right? Just stretch up, just support everything that you've been receiving and everything you're about to receive with the next plenary. A lot of energy and power coming in. And so just support how your body wants to move for a few seconds, supporting the integration. And then we've decided that we're starting a new movement. It's called the Slow Living Summit Hug. At least 8 seconds. And so turn to your right or your left. If you're standing individually, please move and find someone and give some gratitude. Don't you stand back, sit back down.
You're sure about that? That's okay. It's
Todd to get up there and hug the governor.
Well, she's good to hug.
Oh, no, I mean Todd next to him.
Oh, yeah.
He's the trooper I work with.
We got Shumlin. Where's Bernie?
I don't know, he was supposed to. I mean, this was supposed to start at like 1:15.
I know, yeah. You part of security?
I'm a trooper.
Yeah, I figured.
So yeah, he was supposed to be here.
You work with him or with,
No, just the governor.
Yeah. I had to work for many years with Bernie's wife.
Good, bad, no.
Whoa.
Thank you all. You're the
Best you
best.
can get.
Thank you.
He's great.
Yeah, he is. I don't know his wife.
Am I tall? All right, this is what I use. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Governor Peter Shumlin. I'm going to cry. Governor Shumlin has long been touted by numerous groups as one of the greenest governor in the U.S. Governor Shumlin has been very progressive in terms of bringing green technology to Vermont and also greening the state's energy portfolio. On the transportation front, Governor Shumlin has been trying to get the U.S. government to convert to a single emission standard for vehicles. Governor Shumlin has a strong platform of landscape conservation and is making a strong effort in keeping Vermont as an environmental champion. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Governor Peter Shumlin back home, the greenest governor
Should I stand on this? Thank you, Orly. Thank you so much. Sit down. Come on, we got work to do. Hey, let's give it up for Orly Munzing. It doesn't get any better than her organizational skill. It's great to be home, and I want to thank you for allowing me to slow down. One thing I can remember when Governor Douglas was going out the door, and I said, "So tell me what I should know." And he said, "You should know that you're about to lead your life in 20-minute intervals, forever, 7 days a week." And I'm kind of honored that my schedulers and others are letting me stay in Brattleboro for an hour and 45 minutes. So thank you to Slow Living for slowing me down. That's a lot of stops that I won't be making. Listen, what you all are doing here is in the spirit of the best little town in America and the best state in the country. And I know I've met a lot of folks here who are not from Vermont. We welcome you. We take you full-time anytime. I met just a couple of people from Florida, and we've got David Orr here from Ohio. I've met your governors. I can tell you you could do better. And we'd take you as a refugee. Listen, I just want to make a couple of comments about why this is so important to all of us, the work you're doing here today, and reflect a little bit. I'm not going to give you a long speech because I see these mics and I want to give you an opportunity to make comments or ask questions. But what we're doing together in Brattleboro right now, and what we're doing together in Vermont right now, I would argue isn't being done anywhere else in America. And it's absolutely related to the work that you're doing here this weekend and to the work you're doing in your daily lives. And I just want to give you a little bit about how I look at it. At our time in our nation's history, which, despite the best congressional delegation in America, Senator Bernie Sanders, who will be here shortly, Pat Leahy, and Peter Welch, not much good is happening in government. And some people are frustrated that not much is happening in Washington. My view is, with that Congress, thank God. Imagine if something did. I got elected with the biggest group of new governors in the history of America. I went to baby governor school out in Colorado. It's actually true. And you go to baby governor school, and it's taught by older governors to the baby governors. And I was never a very good student, but I tried my best, as many of you know. And I had my first dinner with just the governors, and I got at the table with Scott Walker from Wisconsin and actually Rick Scott from Florida and their wives. And I had a second dinner at the same table. And I left there thinking, you know, one of the biggest struggles for me, as you know, hometown boy, was learning how to read. For those of you who knew that Claire Oglesby, had it not been for Claire, I never would have learned how to read. I'm dyslexic. And I would never have been governor without her, because it's really difficult to be a governor if you can't read. And I left baby governor school thinking, wow, maybe they couldn't read either, and they never learned. But this is what I know about what we're doing in Vermont that I'd argue none of those other governors or that Congress is doing. We are embarking on a leadership journey, I believe, for the rest of the country that doesn't make Vermont different, as they like to say, beyond the Green Mountain borders, but in fact will once again prove that Vermont is leading the rest of the pack. On agriculture, the heart of what holds Vermont together, our quality of life, our sense, our values, and our sense of living. We're doing things that no one else is doing. As you probably know, it was mentioned recently that Vermont is leading the food to plate, food to fork, local farmers markets, the revolution and evolution of small permaculture, small farms, grown locally, ensuring that we move from corporate food to locally grown food. We are doing that in ways, in sponsorship and partnership with state government, that isn't being done in any of the states. I was honored to pass and sign a bill that the legislature helped us with. I know Representative Mike Mowicki is here today, as well as Representative Molly Burke. Thank you for your help. But we passed a bill that sets up the first fund in any state that will give direct grants for the infrastructure so that Vermonters continue to get the value-added product for their goods, processing facilities, the infrastructure that was taken from us by the corporate food market. So on agriculture, I would argue that in addition to the strolling of the heifers, as a symbol of our progress, from Brattleboro to the Canadian border, Vermont is doing locally grown, non-GMO food, farm to plate, farm to fork, farmers markets, making good living for young farmers in ways that isn't happening anywhere else in America. It's a partnership of government and good young farmers who want to work. A bright future. And I can tell you with great confidence that Vermont's best agricultural days are in front of us, not behind us, and together we will continue to have that be a critical piece of our economic development. That's good. I want to just share a personal story with you that I think reflects what's going on in Vermont ag across the state. It broke my heart when the dairy farm that I own in Westminster West, on the land that I grew up on, seventh generation farm, sold its Jersey cows a couple of years ago. And I thought, as the trucks hauled the cows away from that farm, that I would never see cows milked in that barn again. This spring, I had 3 different farmers wanting to lease that farm. One is a wonderful couple up in Townsend who's making the best caramel I've ever tasted out of goat's milk and needs to grow more goats. Another is a friend that I grew up with up the road who's growing Kobe beef. I'm happy eating a Jersey personally, but some kind of Gucci beef. And they're selling it all over New York and other places. And they needed more places to grow the Gucci beef. The third was a kid who was born and raised in Vernon, went to Brattleboro High School, worked for a local farm here all through high school, just loves to farm. He worked for Amanda and Ross Thurber at their farm. Went to Vermont Tech, learned at Vermont Tech how to grow milk and make money, and guess what? 3 weeks ago, Brandon brought his 70-cow herd back home to Windham County and is milking jerseys back in that farm. That's Vermont's farm future. On energy, we are leading by example by harnessing the wind and the sun, our small rivers and streams, our forests, and our fields. by shutting down the old AG nuclear power plants run by companies that we can't trust. And building renewables as fast as we know how. I was honored to sign an energy bill that's going to promote the best net metering program in America, that's going to ensure that the incentives are in place, because Congress won't pass them, so that we can continue to build renewables of all kinds, and most importantly, that we continue with our extraordinary leading example, Energy Efficiency Vermont, to use less power, to use less fuel, to move to plug-ins from fossil fuel, and to build the higher speed rail from New York to Washington with a spur to Montreal that's going to return us to a more sustainable energy future. Vermont's leading. We're doing the work. We're proud of you for helping us. And the third piece is health care. And I can't tell you how many Vermonters are not moving slowly because they can't slow down or they'll lose their health care. That's the truth. Too many of our neighbors are making horrid choices. We have 45,000 uninsured Vermonters. We have 160,000 Vermonters who know that if they get really sick, they're uninsured and they'll go bankrupt. And we have hundreds, tens of thousands of Vermonters who are working jobs that they're unhappy with only because they have some hope of health care security. When Vermont becomes, and we will, the first state in the nation where health care is a right and not a privilege, where it follows the individual and is not required by the employer, and most importantly, where we have a system that reimburses for keeping people healthy, food, locally grown, exercise, getting off the smokes, doing the things we know we should be doing, preventative care of all kinds, instead of rewarding for catastrophic care, which is the current system, we will be the leader for the nation in doing health care right, and everyone will have it. That's going to be huge for Vermont. So those are the few of the things we're up to. I just want to close by saying this. When you look at the transformation that's taken place in the last 40 years, 50 years, I'm not that old, but I can tell you, growing up in this county, when I was a kid, there was no Route 91. If you went to New York or Boston, you went by train. If you bought food, it was mostly, in many cases, from your neighbors, and you grew a lot of it. There was no internet. We had party line telephones, so you didn't like using them unless everyone else in the community was going to hear what you were saying. And we lived much more slowly. I can tell you that raising daughters in this county, their experience was different 30 years later, but not all that different. What they still cherish about their childhood was that we didn't have internet, that we didn't have TV, that we didn't have locks on the doors, that you could leave your keys and your wallet in the car, that we grew a lot of our own food, that they got to take care of the meat that we raised, that they truly grew up in a slow, rural community. So we got a lot going for us. And if we keep focusing on the prize, I say that this conference won't be an aberration, it will be the rule. And we will have a healthier, happier quality of life when we get it done. So don't tell some of you out-of-staters, your governors, what we're up to here, because we don't mind being first. But thank you all for the great work you're doing, and if you have questions, comments, I'd be happy to take them. Orly told me I should, right, Orly? Yes. Yes. I do whatever Orly says. Maybe you should come to the, maybe you should use the mic just so folks can hear you. This is a big room.
Governor, thank you very much for the support on a lot of programs, but I have one question, and that is, what is our state going to do as the challenge that's been given us by Monsanto to tell us about our food?
Well, you know, I was looking at the label on this, on Drew's Classic Italian, aged balsamic and salsa, and I think the best thing about this company is they put right on there, non-GMO project verified. And there's two things we have to do. The first is encourage Congress to pass a labeling law, and the second is get our food producers to start labeling. There's no law against it. The fact of the matter is, I know that you all have spent a lot of time at this conference talking about how our courts view corporatehood, and it's a huge challenge for us when it comes to issues of labeling. I support mandatory labeling, but I can tell you the courts don't. And when Howard Dean was governor, I joined him in passing the first labeling law against Monsanto ever passed by any legislature in the country, when they came out with BST, shooting hormones into the udders of cows to produce more milk. And we passed the law, we signed it, they said they'd sue us, they did sue us, they went to the Second Circuit Court, federal court, they beat us, we had to pay out all kinds of money, and we lost the law. So I liken this struggle to that one. We will win it in the end, but it's consumer education, it's labeling, voluntary for now, and it's getting Congress to roll the federal courts in ensuring that we have the authority to do it.
Thank you.
So that's the challenge that's ahead.
What do you have to say to folks who are considering becoming an entrepreneur, starting a business, getting involved in helping the food and forest system move forward?
Well, there's no better place to do it than Vermont. And that's the first thing I tell folks, and it's really true. We have the best quality of life, the best workforce, and the best corporate ethic in America. There aren't very many outliers here. There aren't very many companies in this state or people that you wouldn't want to do business with, unless they come from Louisiana. And at least parts of Louisiana. And so we really are the place where you should start. I think the second piece is that we have more capital, creative ways to produce capital for startup businesses, and you have consumers who tend to support the small agricultural and other businesses that use the products, the natural resources that we produce in Vermont. So I argue across the country there's no better place to do business than Vermont. The last governor we had didn't always sing that tune. What I'm finding when I tell people that is people get excited. They come to Vermont. They start companies. I'm living an example of a kid who grew up without much, who built 2 businesses right here in Windham County and had more than my share of success. And what I tell folks is this is the place to be successful. This is the place to grow businesses and do it in an ethically, in a state that is committed to ethics and good business practices. So, and the evidence is, peak of the recession, Vermont's unemployment rate was 8.2%. We've got it down to 4.6%, the 4th lowest unemployment rate in America. And here's the best news. Department of Labor Statistics announced 3 weeks ago that Vermont has more green, clean jobs per capita than any other state in America. So what we're doing is working.
Thank you.
Governor, my name's Donny. I'm here from Australia. I spent 6 days actually cycling down from Montreal, so I've had a great chance to see your beautiful state. And
well, welcome to Vermont. Where are you from in Australia?
Just north of Sydney.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so congratulations. It looks like you're doing amazing stuff here. There's only one thing that made me sad, and that was the average size of your vehicles. I wonder what you're doing to incentivize smaller vehicles.
Well, we're thankful. I shouldn't say we're thankful, but let's put it this way. I think the oil companies are doing it for us. It's really true. As soon as you get above $3 a gallon, $3.25 a gallon for fuel in America, people start buying more cars, small cars, efficient cars. And what we're trying to do in Vermont is to move from oil-driven cars to plug-ins and other alternative ways of moving around. And I think that's the one area where I would say all of the 50 states have failed. You know, we, as you know, consume the lion's share of the resources in the world. If you go look at Australian highways, some of your rural areas use a lot of trucks. So, but you do a lot better than we, and most developed countries do a lot better than we do. We're moving as fast as we know how to rebuild rail and to ensure that we're moving to plug-ins and other ways of powering our vehicles. We got a lot of way to go there. That's the place, I think, where you'll see Vermont make the most progress in energy efficiency in the next 20 years, is moving from oil-driven automobiles. So you stick around, stay with us. I know when you guys go on a trip, it's a walkabout, and you go for about 20 years, so stick with us, and you're going to see us change with you. Thanks for coming.
So, Peter, I'm back from Maui to stay. I'm over here, the other way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I thought, wow, I didn't know where that voice was coming from. I thought it was God.
Goddess.
Welcome home.
Thank you. It is good to be back.
You finally got a good governor. You shouldn't have left out there in Hawaii.
Well,
that guy's doing a good job.
I've always been able to vote for you. And will not go into the reasons that I didn't vote in Hawaii. So, to the point of my being here, as a woman who's raised on a farm, I'm very concerned about the depleted soils of the farms from too much fertilizer, the non-organic practices, and I've come across the fact that industrial hemp is great for building soils, and the products of hemp go on forever, like plastics and building materials and insulation. So the request is that you get a federal waiver so that Vermont can grow industrial hemp and become far more profitable.
Well, thank you. That's a great suggestion. I mean, it's a great idea, and I would argue it's a terrible suggestion for the simple reason that if you didn't get a waiver like that out of this Congress, you knew something about Congress I don't know. But this is what I did try to do. I worked together with Mike Mowicki and Molly Burke and others to pass a bill in a legislature that was going to give immunity to farmers who grew hemp in Vermont. And then I was going to let the federal government come after us as they will. That bill failed. Actually, the bill passed both the House and the Senate. It failed for reasons that I won't bore you with, but it had other things in it that got killed at the last meeting of the session, and we're going to try to get it through against next year. But here's the extraordinary thing about what the federal government is doing with hemp. They're confusing it with marijuana. Now, my own view is that they're messing that one up, too. I mean, the biggest challenge, the second biggest challenge, aside from healthcare costs in Vermont, is addiction. And, you know, we're passing out FDA-approved opiates like candy. You can buy it in the drugstore right here in Brattleboro. And then we spend lots of resources locking folks up or spending resources prosecuting small amounts of marijuana. So, hemp and marijuana have no relationship. The federal government doesn't understand that. We do in Vermont, and I believe by next year we'll have a bill, if I'm lucky enough to be governor after November, we'll have a bill that allows us to grow hemp here. The feds may come in and we'll fight that battle when we must. But you'll never get a waiver out of that, Washington. Carolyn's giving me the hook. Orly isn't getting jumpy yet, so I'm sticking with it.
I just moved to Western Massachusetts from Midcoast, Maine.
You got so close. How could you do that?
I lived in Vermont before. I worked for your predecessors, Madeline Kunin.
Oh, great. So you're really deranged that you didn't come all the way back.
Completely nuts.
We'll take you back.
Well, what I'd like to know is how much influence do you have with the governor of Massachusetts? Let's get him on your...
I got to say, Deval Patrick is one of the stars of the American governors. He really is. And thank God you got him, because he's really, I think he's doing a great job down there. He's doing great stuff with health care, and let's keep him strong.
That's good to hear.
Governor Shumlin, I want to say thank you. I come from where there's all beaches and no oceans, Arizona and New Mexico, but I made it over here to Vermont. Beautiful state. I also was going to speak to hemp, but my elder already did that for me. So what I'm going to say is thank you for recognizing the Abenaki bands of Vermont. Thank you very much.
That was really a great moment. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. You know, I realized I left out the most important thing on the hemp question, which is when it comes to how we've treated our soil and abused our soil, I do think it's significant to recognize the evolution among farmers of what we've figured out and how we're practicing differently in so many parts of Vermont. You know, it used to be for years that we would just grow the same crop in the same place, keep throwing the stuff on, till it, go back and do the same thing next spring. What has happened with the education of how to treat our land as those that we took it from did, has really brought about an evolution in not only a better future for our soils, but a better future for our food. And when we recognize and learn about rotation and how to integrate small farms instead of one singular farm just growing one thing, the evolution there is extraordinary. It's happened in the last decade. So I'm very optimistic about our soils in the future.
And I just wanted to add that I was involved with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act campaign when the U.S. Supreme Court passed a very dangerous precedent in the Al Smith case in 1991, denying us the right to use the sacrament payout within the Native American Church. We had to do a lot of education, but Congress is also, I think, has intelligence. There is some intelligence there, and if you can talk to that intelligence, they will understand the difference between marijuana and hemp.
Well, I'll take you with me next time I go down there, because intelligence seems to be in short supply.
How you doing, Governor? Welcome home. I'm originally from Brattleboro. I was born here in '86, and I found with the local farming, economic growth, it has definitely jumped since I've been alive. You know. And, you know, your family, and we probably crossed paths in probably back in the day. I don't know. But I just want to say, you rock, Governor.
Thank you.
I don't know. You rock.
Well, that's a good note to get out of here on. Thank you. Thanks for your great work. You know, I just want to add to what you're saying by telling you this anecdote, and then we'll move on to because you've got some great speakers to hear from, and what David Orr is doing down in Beloit, Ohio, is extraordinary, and I know Senator Sanders is going to come in shortly. Oberlin, Ohio. I get my Ohio's confused. I've never been there, but anyway, great school. I'll close by saying this, just based upon a comment you just made. So when Pete's Green's barn burned down, and that's really a great example, kind of Walker Farm style of how you really feed a lot of people in your region, locally grown great food. And so the barn burned, and I called up Pete and I said, we want to help, and we did, and a lot of people helped. And so one night, up at a place up in Burlington, I'd never been to Burlington before I became governor, but anyway, there's all kinds of people. So I was up there in Chittenden County, and I don't like to leave Vermont, but I went up there anyway. And I went to this concert, and it was incredibly musicians helping to raise money for Pete's Greens. You know, a couple of those guys from Fish, and I don't know, there were a bunch of good musicians. And so I usually get in, they give me my 20 minutes, I said some nice things or whatever, or maybe they weren't nice, I don't know, but I said things, and I went down, and they usually give me the hook. So I said to my great security guys who are here today, listen, I'm going down to the floor, there's good music here. It was late enough at night, they didn't give me another gig, and I'm going to have a few beers and talk to these folks, you know. So I just was there and trying to be sort of not noticed, and I was kind of looked old. And, yeah, anyway. So there I was, and I got to tell you, this is the great part of the story. So the more beer that was drunk, the more they were willing to talk to me, you know. So they kept coming up, and I would say 25 farmers, you know, your age, under 30, is that fair to say? Yeah, there, I had it. Your peers, at least 30 of them come to me and say, Governor, I'm growing milk, I'm growing beef, I'm growing goats, I'm growing vegetables, I'm making cheese, I'm making caramel, I'm growing God knows what, and we're making a great living in Vermont, and we're so excited to be Vermont farmers. That's our future. That's why we're here. Thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Peter. That was great. My name is Alex Wilson. I've been on the program committee and trying to work with Bill Densmore and Orly and Martin Langeveld and Ralph Maima and others to put this program together. And back when we were starting this process, many months ago, we talked about who could we bring in to kind of wrap up the conversation, to pull in the different ideas that have been brought together and really present a vision, or at least describe what a vision would entail. And the first person that came to mind for me was David Orr, someone I've known for, probably 20 years, really one of the sustainability visionaries in the country, one of my heroes, someone I've looked up to for even long before that. And he agreed to come, and I'm thrilled to be introducing David this afternoon. David's the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Studies and Politics at Oberlin College. He's the author of 7 books, has an 8th book coming out next year, The Art of Giving. His most recent book, which I'd strongly recommend you read, is Down to the Wire, Confronting Climate Collapse. David's been active with a lot of organizations, a lot of foundations. He's been on the board of the Rocky Mountain Institute, an organization I greatly respect. He also led the creation of the Lewis Center, a real breakthrough building at Oberlin College, and it was named the most important green building of the past 30 years by the American Institute of Architects recently. And most recently, and I think most excitingly, David's involved heading up a project called the Oberlin Project, looking not just at the college, but at how the college fits into the Oberlin community and how to use the ideas of sustainability that David's been promoting for decades now to strengthen the local economy. So please join me in welcoming David Orr this afternoon.
Alex, thanks. Nice to be here. And Bill Densmore said your assignment was to wrap this up, and no one knew what it all meant because I mean, there's a collective brilliance in this crowd, and I went to maybe 6 sessions. So there's no way to wrap it up. He said, so go to it. So here I am. Bill and Orly, thanks for putting this on. This is a great event, and you've got amazing people here. This is a room full of heroes and heroines doing incredible work. What I'd like you to do is to, come to Ohio as missionaries and help us out. We definitely want your governor. And I asked him just a moment ago if he would agree to be part-time, just come down a couple days a week to help our governor do remedial governing, whatever that's called. So here I am between a great governor and a great senator. Bernie Sanders is somebody I have not met, but I'm looking forward to meeting him in just a few moments. So I'm going to be fairly brief, but I want to point out that the purpose of this event is to focus on the issue of velocity, how fast things move. And we've come through an era when things move very fast. Money moves fast. And people like my friend Anders Ferguson and a number of you in a room are trying to develop patient capital, slow money. And we had fast foods, but to have fast food, you had to have agribusiness. And agribusiness, you had to have chemicals. And so you put together a web of things. And as we increase the velocity of money and of food, you also increase the velocity of soil moving seaward. And you did lots of other things. We're a nation way too heavy, and obesity is a national epidemic, and that's also part of fast food. And when you flip the coin over, the things that we most value are slow things. The things that you learn, or we've all learned, that are the most valuable to us are things that were slow knowledge. It was things acquired patiently over long periods of time. And there are a lot of things that you just can't do quickly. You can't be a fast parent. You can't be a fast friend. You probably can't be a fast lover, but I don't want to go there. Not here. By the way, my granddaughter, I've got 4 grandchildren. My granddaughter, who is age 10 and has the personality of Queen Elizabeth I on speed, she asked me where I was going. I said, well, I'm going to Vermont. Why, Granddad? Well, I'm going to give a talk. To whom? Well, some people. What are they meeting for? Well, Molly, it's a slow living conference. And she said, well, Granddad, you're too fast to talk slow. So she blew my cover. But the point of all this is velocity matters. And if we're going to build a sustainable world, it's going to be a world where a lot of things have to move more slowly. And we'll be the better for it. And then other things have to move fast. We need to make some fast changes. There are some things that we have to learn to do quickly. Ideas don't move quickly enough. Your governor mentioned Congress. And that's kind of a black hole for ideas and movement and so forth. And they still don't get issues of climate change or lots of other things. So there are some things that have to move fast and a lot of things have to move more slowly. So that's the debate. Now, for the last, I've been here about, 27 hours now, and I've only sampled a wee bit of the rich dialogue that you've all been party to and contributed so much to. So what I'd like to do, and this is not a summation of everything, this is just simply to say what these ideas mean when you take it back to my little town in Oberlin, Ohio. It's Rust Belt. It's got a poverty level of 28% at or below poverty. We're in that great belt of America that was disinvested over a period of 4 decades, from stretching from Buffalo to Pittsburgh up to Cleveland and on to Detroit. A good bit of capital was moved out. Human capital was destroyed in the process. So that's where I'm from. On the screen behind me, I assume, yeah, this is my friend David Klein. David is old order Amish, and David is a slow person. When I taught a course in sustainable agriculture, I'd always take my students to his farm. And my students would say things like, that's the best day I had in 4 years. Or he is so patient. It's always in the middle of spring, and he's got the spring plowing, and he runs a dairy farm of 35 to 40 head of cattle. And so, but he was always kind. It took time to meet with him and talk with him, and always slowly. I mean, there was something about slow living. Not nirvana, but this is an awfully good screenshot. Let me, seems to work. I'm going to flip through a couple things here. This is where we all know we're headed. This is the Keeling curve on speed. This is a climate record of about 650,000 years, and we know that CH4, methane, and carbon dioxide, CO2, and temperature tended to go in lockstep. And looking ahead, and the only reason putting this on the screen is just to say we don't have much time. So when you think of slowness, we've got to think of slow ways to move quickly to a very different kind of world. And the only reason this is here is we're now looking at temperature records or temperature increases likely to go up somewhere around 2 to perhaps a high of 4 degrees centigrade, not Fahrenheit, 4 degrees centigrade by mid-century or 2060. That's now the projections. If you saw the news yesterday, the CO2 level over the Arctic was recorded at 400 parts per million. And you remember the background rate was 280 parts per million. So this is, we're turning the thermostat of the Earth up, and this is serious stuff. Now this slide, and I don't like a lot of reading on slides, but this is an important shot. Once we've changed atmospheric chemistry, it tends to be permanent. So if you go back and read the climate science from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and those 4 reports, the 4th came out in 2007, the 5th is underway now. The reports say unequivocally that you put carbon in the atmosphere, it's going to stay there a long time. So we're now facing 1,000 years of rising temperatures, rising sea levels, and it could be a good bit more. David Archer is making the point here that it's in fact a much longer time. So having changed atmospheric chemistry, this is what we have to live with. Now, people say, well, gee, that's so depressing. Well, my point here is that if you're depressed by this, if you're depressed by depressing news, that's a good thing. You should be depressed by depressing things, but we have to have the courage to look at this and understand where we are and what we've got, the work we've got in front of us, and the work that all of you are doing to build a model of local economies and local farms and local businesses and local investment practices that begin to move us in a very different direction. That's important stuff, and do it with a sense of dispatch. Now, this is an audience participation point here. How many recognize that curve? Anybody not recognize that curve? Let's put it that way. And then there's that curve. Anybody not recognize that? Speaking of speed. And then there's that curve. And then there is, this is sort of hit and miss, isn't it? There's that curve, and you can't see this, but this, of course, is the Keeling curve. This is the carbon in and out of the atmosphere every year. So this is breathing in and out. This is the curve that David Keeling famously began and collect data for in 1958 when he went to Mauna Loa. And in 1958, the CO2 level in the atmosphere was 315 parts per million. We're now at about 393 and recorded 400 over the Arctic, as I mentioned a moment ago. I pointed out that to an audience last year that one of these would kill you. And somebody in the audience pointed out, no, 3 of them will kill you. So anyway, this is a, but if you go to the local mall, how many people recognize those curves or the Keeling curve? And the answer is very few. And so the one thing, the most important issue that we face as humans in the year 2012 has to do with climate, not global warming, but climate destabilization. Now I'm going to move on. If this thing, this is going to take, I'm going to get politically just for a moment before I turn to the work at hand. We're trying to reshape American culture and also preserve a working democracy, but that's not going to happen in a society where 400 of the wealthiest control more wealth than the bottom 150 million people. And so income redistribution of some kind in some fashion, but this is not the prescription, this is not the foundation for democracy. 400 of the wealthiest control more wealth than the bottom 150 million people. Some people say it's the bottom 185 million people, but let's just work with the lower number here. So that's my political point. Supreme Court's totally happy with this. So the Supreme Court, the top decision here, and make a note of this. There's some things you don't have to know about politics, but this is one you have to know. So the Santa Clara County decision in 1886, the Supreme Court was said to have given the legal rights of persons to corporations. In fact, it did no such thing. So go back and read the history of that decision. But it was a 14th Amendment decision, and the Supreme Court was said to have given or decided that corporations had the legal rights of persons. Mitt Romney still thinks that they do or should. But that's another matter. But in fact, that's not what the court decided. The court was deciding a tax case involving, a very minor tax case involving back taxes that the railroad had not paid, and the county took them to court and lost in the Supreme Court. It was the secretary to the court that made the note in the head notes of the decision that, in fact, the court had decided something. The court didn't decide at all. Justice Wade, who was from Toledo, Ohio, had made no such ruling. So anyway, Buckley versus Vallejo, money in politics, and money, in fact, is a form of free speech. And now cut off here at the bottom, Citizens United. If there was ever a lousy Supreme Court decision, I mean, you can name several. You go back to the Dred Scott decision in 1858. You come up through Bush versus Gore in the year 2000, and then this, which opens the floodgates to all kind of money in politics, which is corrupting us. Now, I put this in here because I think we have to know that the backdrop for what we're trying to do is in fact very political. Now, this is cut off at the bottom, but this switches gears to get over to the Oberlin Project. What we're trying to do is to figure out how to begin to take back our country. And so the Tea Party movement, I'm fully in agreement. We've got to take it back. But we have to take it back from the banks and from the merchants of sprawl and from agribusiness and from concentrated capital, that oil money and coal money and so forth. That's the country we have to recover. So what do we do about that? This is where I live. Last year I said, in total jest, I said, you know, you get pictures like this by taking a first-year student, strapping him or her to a helium-filled balloon and giving him a camera with electronic download. And I made some wise comment that, you know, Bob took this picture. It was a wonderful picture, and he was a great kid, really sweet kid. And We miss him a lot. Said he didn't transfer, he just kind of drifted away. And a woman afterwards came up and said, you know, you really shouldn't treat your students like that. So this is actually taken without, first-year student. But this is very typical Ohio downtown. This is behind me. It's going to come up here on the screen if we can make this work. This, again, it's cut off at the bottom. This is a city of about 10,000. We are Rust Belt. In the next slide, you'll see we're in that belt around Lake Erie. Poverty level is about 28%. The free and reduced lunch kids in the school are around 52% or 53% of the kids. So this is a challenged community, very representative of the Midwest in lots of ways. We're a very good snapshot of Detroit to Cleveland on to Pittsburgh and so forth. This is, Wyatt, you want to just hit the advance button there? It'll save us a bit of time. Are you still up there? Thanks. So this is what we aim to do. We started off with 5 challenges. One is to begin to build a prosperous economy in the heart of the Rust Belt, powered by efficiency and sunlight. We wanted to see if we can grow 20 or 70% of our food from local farms. And Ohio was once a state that had 250,000 farms. We're now down to about 65,000. Then educate everybody for sustainability, and then create a model. This gets more complicated, but can we begin to do sustainability as a systems kinds of thing, where the components begin to reinforce the resilience and stability and prosperity of the whole thing? Next slide, please. This is where we are. Detroit's about 80-some miles across Lake Erie, Toledo over here, Oberlin here, Cleveland here, Youngstown about an hour and a half to my east, to your right. I grew up not far from Youngstown, Ohio, and Youngstown, I can remember, was a prosperous, brawling, dirty mill town, but there was activity going there. It is now a ghost town. Next slide, please. This is our downtown. If you sell beer and pizza, you're in good shape, or coffee. If you sell dry goods, hardware, or anything else, life is pretty tough for you. So the merchants, all the stuff that's gone out to Walmart, Walmart has killed an awful lot of downtowns. And so the money goes out, and we do have a Walmart about 2 miles down the road here. Next slide, please. This, as Alex mentioned, this is the Adam Joseph Lewis Center. This became the kind of the proof of concept for what we're calling the Oberlin Project. This was a project that we did in the late 90s. The attempt here was to design a building powered by sunshine and drinking water in, drinking water out. And this was something we made an educational project around. So we had about 250 students work with a design team that included about 24 people, Amory Lovins and John Todd and Carol Franklin and people from NASA and the McDonough firm and so forth. So we had a lot of people work on this, but we made it an educational project. And in the making of this, we developed a building that is powered 100% now by renewable energy and efficiency. Processes all its own wastewater. There are a number of ways you can do that. You can put the toilets in another building. We actually used the John Todd designed living machine. We have a pond on the side here, off to the right here. And that was a bit of a battle. The college attorney at the time didn't want us to do a pond because somebody would skinny system was done by students that worked in this building 12 years ago. That's now a company called Lucid Designs. The building has 2 photovoltaic arrays, generates about 160 kW on site. We're a net metering state, so we send the excess power back to the grid. The back of the building, you'll not see here, but the back of the building is basically a small farm with orchards, and the kids have chickens that run around, and it's maintained by students. The living machine here processes, which is the right side of the building, processes all the wastewater. It looks like a tropical greenhouse. So this became proof of concept. Now this is an 1.25 acre site. The building size is about 13,700 square feet, so it's small. Next slide, please. I'll tell you what, you can just list all these. Just hit that until we've got the goals of what we're taking to be the Oberlin Project are these. We want to, first of all, develop a 13-acre block downtown as the driver for downtown renewal. We want to do that. It's about a 3-megawatt load. We want to do the whole block so that it's powered by sunshine and efficiency. Process all the wastewater in the block so it's a zero discharge block Same thing we did on the Lewis Center in a single building. The second goal here is to get to carbon neutrality or climate neutrality. We're one of 14 sites selected by the Clinton Climate Initiative to be climate positive. And this is going to change our economy. We are deploying right now a 3-megawatt solar array. The city electrical supply next year will be 95% carbon free. We're looking at our larger carbon footprint. We've probably got another decade or decade and a half of work to get to carbon neutrality, to cross that final line. Third goal here is to build a 20,000-acre green belt around the city so that the city food supply is 70% locally derived. And then the fifth goal here is to do this as part of an educational consortium that involves a 2-year college, a VOTEC school, the public schools, and the college. And the last item here, number 7 on this screen, is to replicate this as a national network. So we've set up an office in Denver. We're opening an office in Washington, D.C. to replicate the similar kind of things at varying scales and different cultures around the country. Next slide. Now, this says full spectrum sustainability up on top. Now, we've organized the community into about 10 or 11 teams. I couldn't figure out enough about PowerPoint to get 10 or 11 balls here, so there's just 7 here. But we've gone around the community and we've organized, so there's a team working on education, there's one working on economic development, there's one working on energy systems and so forth. About 300 people out of a city the size of 10,000 are engaged in this. Most of them are city people, not faculty. So this is a college city partnership, but most of the impetus now comes from people in the city. Now, full spectrum sustainability just means this. You're going to have lunch with a lot of different people. So if you want to do anything, instead of doing sustainability as one-off things, and you know what I'm talking about, because we've done sustainable agriculture as one-off, and then renewable energy, and then green building, and then education, but they never meet. The goal here is to put them into a systems context so that every one of those begins to reinforce the prosperity, resilience, and viability of all the others. One illustration. If you want to get people back on the land, if farming is important to you, then you better have somebody from the educational establishment there at the table, because this is not what kids are learning when they're coming out of high school or colleges. People don't know how to farm anymore. You better have somebody from the capital team or the economic development team, because farming, even at a small scale, is expensive. You start at about $500,000 and you work up very quickly. You better have somebody there from the policy team, because there are a lot of farm laws, as was mentioned in the question for Governor Shumlin. And then you better have somebody from a market team. You better have markets for farmers to sell in. And so to do one thing, you've got 4 or 5 teams, full spectrum sustainability or integrated sustainability by whatever means. But it means breaking down the silos and barriers between various kinds of things. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to get through this. This is Danella Meadows. Go Google Dana Meadows leverage points. Dana was one of the great voices in sustainability thinking, one of the co-authors of the book The Limits to Growth and then The Limits Revisited, and lots of other things. And the point of this slide is simply this. Where do we as change agents or whatever, however you label yourself, where do we intervene in the system to be effective? It's one thing to be right. It's a wholly different thing to be right and effective. And so what Dana was trying to get at here was, where do we intervene? And the least effective ways are up here, subsidies, taxes, and laws. The most effective ways are down here, changing mindsets. And so our work really is to begin to change mindsets. So remember, Google Danella Meadows, leverage points, you can see the whole article. Now, the question for us is, where do we begin to intervene to slow down the velocity of the culture? And I think it's down here again, goals of the system, mindset, worldviews, and so forth. Next slide. So that's your second reading assignment. This is an aerial view of the Green Arts District. This for us is going to be a driver, and I want to point this out briefly. It's going to sound like an advertisement for Oberlin College. This is the Allen Art Museum. It's a Cass Gilbert building, built in 1917. One of the great art museums in higher education, generally ranking behind those at Harvard and Yale. This is Hall Auditorium, a performing arts center. This is the Oberlin Inn, 1955 Motor Inn. My president says, don't ever tell people ever again that this is a plausible excuse for limited nuclear war. So I don't say that anymore. But this thing needs to go. Next slide. This is what we've got a team of planners, site planners, and then architects, engineers, and so forth working on the design of a new inn. This is kind of skewed off the screen here, but this is a new hotel configuration. This is hall auditorium with additions to it. Oh, thank you for that. This is the art museum. This will be student housing and so forth. Now, for us, we want to do this. When you add up all the power requirements, this is about 3 megawatts of demand. We want to do this with renewable energy and efficiency. And we want to make this also, as we did to the Lewis Center, a zero discharge block. So it's drinking water comes in, drinking water leaves it. Next slide. This is a ground level shot of what we hope is going to be a new hotel that we'll start construction on later this year. Not quite determined. This goes to the board next week, next Friday. But this is what a hotel might look like. There across the street is a renovated historic theater that the college bought, and that's nearing completion. And then a project down here you'll see in just a moment. Next slide. This is right across the street, and this is something I'm really proud of. We had 3 students that, in the lingo of higher education, failed to launch. And they hung around and formed a development company, raised $17 million, and completed a gold-level 3-building complex with 33 condominiums, mixed income, with commercial space on the first floor. And so this anchors the south side of this block. Now, the goal here is to revive an old Rust Belt downtown and make this work, pull money and people and so forth back into the downtown. So this is part of the new urbanist model. Next slide, please. Next slide. Do you want me to say more about this one? Well, this really is an amazing story. There really is a lot more to be said about it. These 3 students went through, is that, okay, does anybody know a joke? Tell me. Okay, that's not part of mine, but I can talk about her. Okay, there we are. We're going to recap. This is, yeah, you all recognize this. And there's Bob flying over. There we go. We're gaining on it. Boy, that was a timely introduction. We just did. That's PV. That's parking down below. We're deploying a 3-megawatt solar array right now. It'll be operational by August. This, by the way, is Sherrod Brown, who's one of the good guys in the U.S. Senate. If you watch Rachel Maddow, Sherrod is frequently on, and my daughter-in-law works for Sherrod, so truth in advertising here. Right after I snapped this picture, Sherrod turned to me and said, "Where did you get the PV?" And I said, "Well, Sherrod, our choices when we had to make a decision were to buy from Germany or buy from Japan. It would now be mostly China." And the irony was not lost on him because most of the technology for PV in the United States was developed at the NASA Glenn Space Center, which is 24 miles to the east of where we're standing here. The largest manufacturer of PV equipment at that time was First Solar, which was 55 miles to the west. Yet we were having to buy, but they had dedicated all their production to Germany because Germany had a feed-in tariff. And so this is no way to run a country. Next slide. That's the only point I was going to make with that. Next slide. This is the first farm that we started. The intention here is to grow or transform 35 farms locally. And again, Ohio was a state that once had 250,000 farms. We're now down to about 65,000, most of which are in the corn and soybean business, selling protein to feedlots in the Midwest. Next slide. This is just kind of a recap of things happening as part of the Oberlin project, but how do you begin to pull the pieces together that you've all talked about for the last 3 days into something that's a coherent development strategy? This is a development corridor that runs north-south through the city. The Lewis Center you saw, that's completed. This is about completed. There'll be a public school done the way we did the Lewis Center. It'll be a consolidated school. The Allen Arts project is completed. There's a new hotel we hope to get started on late this year. The Green Arts District is everything here. The theater is right here. That's completed. So there's about, when you add up everything, there is roughly $300 or $400 million of redevelopment here. If you ask how it's funded, my one answer is I buy lottery tickets. But the real answer is it's laminated. People like Anders Ferguson here and many of you in the room know a lot more about funding and financing than I do. But there's new market tax credits, there's TIF financing, there's some federal money, there's some state money, there's private investment. But the funding is actually laminated from a variety of different sources. Next slide. Go ahead and scroll down this. This is where we are, and I'm not going to repeat all this stuff, but we're 3 years into what we're calling the Oberlin Project. We've spent from all sources for everything related to this about $53 million. If you add up everything, it probably goes a little bit over 60. But we have a long way to go. A lot of the art of this, and I was really pleased to see the number of panels here about funding and finance, because that's the heart of it. If we can't figure out how to pay for things, then there are a lot of good things that just aren't going to happen. Next slide. This is what's on tap right now. The hotel for us is going to be the big driver. It will be the anchor that holds the downtown together. We believe that can be a huge economic asset to the city, but at the platinum level plus, but also functioning as a buyer of local foods and local woodwork and local craft work and local artwork and even all the way out to toiletries. Next slide. Now I want to conclude with a couple of things. I started with some thoughts about climate destabilization. Again, it's not global warming, it is climatic destabilization. Everything we take for granted, most of what we take for granted is going to be in jeopardy or undermined as we turn the thermostat up further and further. That's why we've got to get climate on the agenda of Congress. We need a carbon tax or cap and trade, whatever the policy mechanism is. But this is a mortal threat to civilization, and that's not me talking, that is the scientific discussion. But if we act in time, what's the world like? Well, it's a world that can still be made beautiful, fair, and decent and just. It's a world with more bike trails and fewer malls, less television and more personal contact, more baseball leagues and poetry leagues and more people talking to each other. It certainly means more local foods and more restaurants and the work that all of you are engaged in. That is still a good world. That's a world worth fighting for. Next slide. Now, one of the conversations that comes up, all this stuff about velocity and slow food and slow living and so forth is all about sustainability. And we struggle to understand what sustainability is all about. And it's a word that is, frankly, I said this morning in one of the panels, it's really a boring word. Bill McDonough used to joke that if you ask what's your relationship with your spouse or mate or whatever, your wife, your husband, and you say, my relationship with him or her is sustainable. That's pretty boring. But we're wonky people, and we've got to begin to think about how to convey this civilizational transformation in very different ways. My favorite way to do this is refers back to Robert Fulghum's book, All I Ever Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And he makes it very simple. The rules you learned in kindergarten were, first of all, play fair, Koch brothers. Clean up your messes, Koch brothers, Dow Chemical, Exxon Mobil. Share your cookies. For all those people who believe that 400 people can have as much wealth as the bottom 150 million, that doesn't cut it. Don't take things that aren't yours. And then when you're in danger, hold hands crossing the street. That's sustainability. And we learned that. We know it. We can make this very complicated. But in essence, this is really a simple thing. It is to live well, play fair, build a beautiful civilization that is just and decent. Hey, thank you all very much.
thank you, David. This was amazing. Thank you so much. I think it really wraps up what we've talked about. Without much ado, there's not much I can say about the next person that I'm going to introduce. You all know him. Senator Sanders is here. But I want to tell you just one tiny little story, and I'll make it really short, because I sometimes can go probably too long. And that is, when I had the idea for the Strolling of the Heifers, I was sitting at the River Garden with my friend Fern, and I was telling her about it, and all of a sudden, this was about 12 years ago, he was Congressman Sanders at that time, and he walks in, and I was sitting on the little porch there, the deck, and with my chutzpah, I didn't know him, and I walked up to him and I said, you know, I have this idea. And he says, oh yeah, what is it? And I told him about it. He says, oh my God, that is a wonderful idea. And he started giving me his card and made all his assistants give me his card. And he says, I want to hear about it and you should do this. And he encouraged me. And those words gave me the courage to do that. And I thank him so much. And I'd like to, with greatest honor, introduce you to Senator Sanders. I just want to say one thing. This is the senator that works the hardest to bring slow living some principles.
Thank you. Let me begin by thanking Orly for organizing this very important conference. As Orly indicated, I have known her for many, many years. And in my humble opinion, she is one of the most creative people that I have ever met, and certainly one of the very best organizers. So Orly, thank you very much for all that you do for our state. And if truth be known, what I was really thinking at the time when I met Orly is that she was a little bit crazy. I mean, imagine cows marching down Main Street, Brattleboro. What a nutty idea. But it has turned out to be enormously successful. And we thank Orly for all of what she does. As somebody who comes home every weekend, gets around the state, who sits on 5 Senate committees, a dozen subcommittees, I am the least qualified person in the world to talk about slow living. I'm exhausted all of the time, can't communicate with anybody, so you'll take that for what it's worth. But what I did want to say, and why this conference is so very important, is there is an old political adage which says something to the effect, it is impossible to get there if you don't know where you're going. All right? So we can talk all we want about this, that, and the other thing, but at the end of the day, we have got to know where we want to go. And I think the last presentation that we heard, which was so wonderful, and I'm sure a lot of the presentations that we've heard at this conference tells us that. What are we striving for at the end of the day? We're to fight tomorrow's battles tomorrow, but where do we want to be in the years to come? And in a sense, what we're doing here, which happens so rarely in our country today, where we're dominated by 6-second sound bites, is what really we are talking about, what you guys have been talking about, is what philosophers have talked about for hundreds and hundreds of years. What is the good life? How do we create human potential? How do we create community in which people can live and love and flourish? It's been discussed for hundreds and hundreds of years, but we don't see it too much on cable TV. And that's what we need to do, and that's why a conference like this is so important. I do want to say something, though, and that's because of the world that I live in. A word of caution, and that is, while it is enormously important that we know where we want to go, that should not be for 1 second an excuse to turn our backs about the struggles that are taking place today and tomorrow. It's very easy to do that, but we can't afford to do that. And what that's about, in my view, is an understanding about what is going on in our country today. And the fact that we are living in a nation that has the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. It's a nation where you have just heard 400 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America. 1% own 40% of the wealth. The bottom 60% own 2% of the wealth. It's a nation in which, right before our eyes, middle class is collapsing, median family income is down, millions of people working longer hours for low wages, kids are graduating college this week, this month, deeply in debt, no jobs out there for them. What a terrible way to begin your adult life, trying to break away from home, can't do it. Talk to older people, and that's what I do. It's part of my job, talk to older people, 50, 55, 60, who had hoped to work for the remaining years of their life until retirement. They were fired. Their self-esteem has been destroyed. They don't have enough money to live a dignified retirement. Maybe they lost their money a few years ago when the stock market crashed. That's a reality, and we cannot forget that reality. We can't forget about how we go from here to there requires a government that is working for the needs of ordinary people and not just the wealthy. And I have to remind you again, because this is kind of what I'm obsessed with. It's a little bit outside if I know what the conference is about, but it's about billionaires right now going to war against the vast majority of the people in a way that we have not seen since the 1920s. I mean, class warfare in a naked, unbridled way, where billionaires are now pumping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into their candidates in opposition to good candidates. You saw a picture of a good friend of mine, Sherrod Brown. Some of you may know is the senator from Ohio. He's running for re-election. As of today, the Koch brothers and Karl Rove and those guys have poured more than $5 million already against him. So that's the reality that we are facing, and I hope as we look to the future that we don't forget about where we are today. One of the interesting points about the subject of the conference and where I think we all want to go is that not only is it the moral thing to do, but in many ways it is good economics and fiscal responsibility. Okay? Let me give you some examples. When we talk about where we want to go, one of the things that we have always got to remember is that everybody has to go with us. It's not just the upper middle class. And let us never forget, as we go forward, trying to take this nation and world in a new direction, about the impact of something as a simple a concept as economic insecurity. Okay? So you can't be talking about moving forward into sustainability, new energy systems, new transportation systems, without dealing with the issue of income insecurity. I want to tell you a story. I am chairman of a subcommittee on the Health, Education, Labor Committee, which deals with primary health care and aging. And we had a hearing a couple of months ago. We had some really great physicians, panelists up there. And one woman, she's a doctor, she said something which I will never forget. And this has to do with sustainability, moving forward in a new direction. This is what she said. She said that people who live in the bottom 20 percentile, bottom 20% of income earners, live 6 years less than people who are in the top 20%. Do you know that? And I said, and you think, okay, well, why is that so? Well, there's some obvious answers. People at the lower end of the income strata don't have access to good health care, and that's important. But what she said is, yeah, that's important. And we lose a lot of people in this country because they don't have the money to get to a doctor when they should, and we don't have any kind of a good primary health care system. But this is what she also said. She said, Think about the stress that people who are poor are living under every single day. And if you're not in that situation, it is very easy to forget about that. People who are poor, and there are more poor people in America today, some 46 million than we've ever had. People who are poor are literally wondering about how they're going to feed their family, how they're going to put gas in the car to get to work if they have a job, what happens to somebody if somebody in the family gets sick and they don't have any health insurance. How do you get the kids to school? How do you make sure that the kids do well in school? How do you put aside some money so that when you get old and fragile, you'll have the opportunity to live a dignified retirement? Day after day, that is what those people are dealing with. For low-income women, when they are pregnant, they are much more likely to deal with that pregnancy alone than having somebody on their side. Try being pregnant, giving birth, being poor, and being on your own. So what we have never can't forget in the midst of this whole discussion is when we move to the future, what we have got to do is have a society in which health care is a right, not a privilege. Have a society where the basic economic needs of people are addressed. Is that going to make everybody happy and live a full life? Absolutely not. But taking the burden of worrying what happens to you and your family when you're sick is a huge step forward. You could breathe a little bit better, knowing that your kid, regardless of the income of your family, is going to be able to go to college. You know what that means to moms and dads all over this country? Knowing that you're not going to go hungry, that we have a system to make sure that everybody in this country has at least enough to eat, that we have a child care system that's working. Now, not only, as I mentioned before, is this the moral thing to do, it is good economics. And I'll just give you just a few examples. In this country today, we have a healthcare system which is basically dysfunctional. And one of the manifestations of that dysfunctionality is that you got millions and millions of people who, when they get sick, can't find a doctor. So what happens when you get sick and you can't find a doctor because we're the only country in the industrialized world that does not have a national health care system? What happens? What happens is, needless to say, you become sicker. And you walk into the emergency room, which, by the way, will cost, in many cases, 10 times more than walking into a community health center, which we are trying to build all over Vermont and all over America. But it costs 10 times more. And then maybe because you're really sick, they're going to send you to the hospital because you should have been treated 6 months before at a cost of tens and tens of thousands of dollars to the system. So the argument has been made and needs to be made again that when you have a universal national health care program guaranteeing health care to all people, in the long run, by keeping people healthy, it doesn't cost you any more money. Okay? I talked to a doctor last year in northern Vermont. She works in a working class area, I think in Milton. She says, she writes out, people come into her office, diagnoses them, writes out a prescription. 30, 40% of those people can't afford to fill the prescription. It's basically insane. It makes no sense at all. So the patient can't get the treatment that is prescribed because the patient can't afford the high cost of prescription drugs. So this is a totally dysfunctional system, and a system which ends up costing us more per person for health care than any other nation on earth. But it's the same thing when you talk about sustainability, when you talk about the relationship, which is what this whole conference is about, the relationship of one thing to another thing to another thing. The United States today has 22% of our kids living in poverty. That's the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world. Meanwhile, as part of that equation, the United States has more people in jail than any other nation on earth, including China, which is 3 times our size and is an authoritarian communist nation. So what's the point? The point is you have huge numbers of kids in poverty. You have a totally inadequate child care system. You have kids going to school who, on the first day of school, already fall behind many of their classmates. You have 25, 30% of the kids in America dropping out of high school. You have police chiefs in Vermont and all over America who will introduce you to the kids who will be in jail in 3 years at $50,000 a shot. So what we are doing is arresting and incarcerating people rather than putting money into families and into child care and into nutrition and into education. This not only obviously causes an enormous amount of human sufferings, but if you are a conservative worried about money, it also makes no sense. And you don't have to be a utopian, and I love utopians, who are people who are talking about where we want to be. You can just go to countries like Sweden or Finland, where their poverty rate is for children is 2 or 3%, where everybody who has the ability can get to college regardless of their income, and the percentage of their people behind bars per capita is a tiny fraction of what it is in the United States of America. Let me just say a word on some of the energy issues, because I sit on both the Environmental and the Energy Committee. And again, the point to be made is that when you deal with issues like the environment, investing in the environment, making sure that the air that we're breathing is clean, making sure that the food that we're eating is healthy, not full of chemicals, is in the long run also cost effective. I mean, nobody does know how much cancer in this country is caused by air pollution. Certainly, there is a significant amount of that. How much, nobody knows. I can tell you that in schools all over the state of Vermont, we have a high incidence of asthma. How does that relate to the particulates that come from the Midwest coal-burning plants? Don't know, but it certainly has an impact. We know that crappy food leads to obesity, leads to diabetes. We know that as well. So the point here is that keeping people healthy, fulfilled, educated, in the long run, not only leads to better, contented, happier lives, but also saves us substantial sums of money. Now, in terms of energy, let me give you just some update on what is happening in Washington. I want you all to understand this, because it's not what it appears on the TV. The line of some of my colleagues is, hey, we believe in it all. We believe in coal. We believe in oil. We believe in sun. We believe in wind. We believe in geothermal. We believe in everything. They're lying. They don't. The reality is they are putting huge amounts of effort and lobbying capabilities into sustaining oil, into sustaining coal, and they are working overtime to try to destroy our efforts to move forward on energy efficiency, weatherization, and sustainable energy. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Just the other day, I think it was yesterday, of all of the places in the world to go, Mitt Romney ended up in front of a bankrupt company that was producing solar panels. Think that was an accident? Do you think that it is an accident in a capitalist society that conservatives would be attacking General Motors because they're producing the Chevy Volt? I mean, stop and think. This is a car being manufactured in America by American workers. It is being attacked because it may lead us to the electrification of transportation in America. Being attacked. Hearings about the bloody Chevy Volt. I don't recall any hearings about the Hummer, which gets 3 miles per gallon. And when you talk about subsidies for sustainable energy, they forget to tell you about the subsidies, the billions that have gone into nuclear power. They forget to tell you that if, God forbid, there is a major nuclear disaster in this country similar to Fukushima, the taxpayers in this country are going to be on the hook for perhaps hundreds of billions of dollars, because there is a federal law which provides insurance to the nuclear industry, because nobody on Wall Street wants to provide that risky insurance. And they forget to tell you that the taxpayers of this country are putting money into figuring out what we do with nuclear waste, whether it's Yucca Mountain or any place else, or all of the research and development that went into nuclear energy. But what I can tell you is, and I believe this absolutely strongly, absolutely from the bottom of my heart, that if this country had the political will right now, we can, in fact, transform our energy system away from oil, away from coal, away from nuclear, into energy efficiency, into wind, solar, geothermal, biomass. We can do that. We could do that. I will... There are major breakthroughs, and in fact, we have made a little bit of progress, nowhere near where we should. We've made a little bit of progress in the last few years. I mean, drive around the state of Vermont, see a hell of a lot more solar panels than you did a couple of years ago. You're seeing buildings now all over the state moving to geothermal, which is a very strong technology. Energy efficiency, the state is leading America. There's new energy efficient technologies out there. We have worked together. I've helped fund projects where those projects are now using 80% less energy than was previously the case. Can you believe that? 80% less. And we can do that in buildings and homes throughout the state of Vermont. And when we talk about the economy, I all want you to know that when we transform the energy system away from coal, away from oil, away from nuclear, into energy efficiency and into sustainable energy, we can create millions of jobs as we do that. So that's an issue that we have to stay focused on. Let me just conclude by telling you that if you were to ask me where an issue that I have been more astounded on than any other issue in Washington, it is the issue of global warming. And the idea that an issue like global warming should be politicized to the degree that it is literally beyond comprehension, and it simply speaks to the greed of the coal industry, of the oil industry, of their funding all of these phony think tank organizations that are doing exactly what the tobacco industry did 40 or 50 years ago, trying to cast doubt on the issue of global warming. The idea that you have people now in the Congress, and this is at a very scary time, particularly scary, who are rejecting virtually all of the scientific evidence about global warming. It's not a debate. Virtually the entire scientific community is united in saying global warming is real. Global warming is causing devastating destruction today, and if we don't reverse it, it will only get worse in years to come. A couple of months ago, I did a press conference, one of the more amusing press conferences I've ever done. And the people who were there with me were the insurance industry, generally not regarded as one of the more progressive organizations in America. Now, why was I there talking about global warming with the insurance industry? Because they got in front of the microphones and they said, hey, all we can tell you, we're not scientists, but all we can tell you is that we're losing our shirts and we're paying out huge sums of money, the claims that are coming in, because we have never seen the level of severe weather disturbances that this country is now experiencing. And we in the insurance industry think it might be a good idea if the Congress started to address this issue. That's the insurance industry. So I think what we want to do in terms of energy is stand up and fight not only for ourselves, but more importantly for our kids and our grandchildren. If we don't get a handle on this issue, and there are those who think we may be already too late, but if we don't get a handle on this issue, transform our energy system in this country, lead the world in a new direction. If we don't do that, I worry very much about the world we'll be leaving to my kids and my grandchildren. So, let me just conclude by once again thanking Orly and all of you for your discussing these enormously important issues. That is exactly what we have got to do as a nation. And what I will tell you as somebody who goes around the country a bit and talks to a whole lot of people, do not be fooled into thinking that there are not millions and millions and millions of Americans who understand the importance of localism, buying local, who understand the importance of protecting our environment, of addressing global warming. You may not see that reality reflected in corporate TV, but it is there. And it takes bold souls and visionaries to raise the issues, to start moving. And by the way, when we talk about being visionaries and being leaders, I believe and hope very, very much that this small state can lead the nation in terms of healthcare, in terms of transforming our energy system, in terms of helping small-scale local agriculture flourish, in terms of education. And if we can do what I think we can do, create the kind of state that I believe we can, create the strong economy that we can, in terms of producing jobs in healthcare and agriculture and education and meaningful products, the rest of the country will look to this small state and they will say, thank you, Vermont. Thank you all very much.
I want to thank everyone here, the speakers who volunteered their time, all the wonderful volunteers, the executive committee who helped create this incredible conference. Too many names to name, and I also want you to enjoy, when you leave these doors, if you haven't been here, it's not Brattleboro anymore, it's Cattleboro. And we have an agricultural block party for you outside with lots of vendors, music, and a bread competition which the senator and the governor will be awarding the prizes at 7 o'clock, and they'd be happy to chat with you at that point. So this is the serious side of the Strolling of the Heifers, and thank you for letting us have the second year of the Slow Living Summit. We've all worked really hard here to live more slowly, and I hope to see you next year. And Bill Densmore, Lori Hanau, Alex Wilson, Geraldine Wilson, I can go on and on, Martin Langeveld, who's getting ready on Main Street. Thank you to everyone, our tech guys, Wyatt, Spencer, Donald. I could keep going on and on. I feel like I'm in the Academy Awards. My time is off. Cattleboro!